how to get you comfortable with them, to inform you, to get you excited and enthusiastic. And I really want to show you how to maintain them easily and comfortably. The varieties that we have in front of us, these are all from the growing place, and there are always people here on the phone or in person that can give you good advice about them or help you. But I'm really here to make sure that you know their needs and then how to maintenance them. We're going to repot some, we're going to clean some up, and there's just certain basic needs that they have that I want to make sure you're comfortable with. And it's super, super easy. In my home, I have them in every room, clustered by their containers and by their plant needs, and they become a part of my interior decorating. They're not just thrown out. And so hopefully by the end of our visit this morning, you're going to see how I vision the pleasure of these plants for you. But I wanted to start with these adorable little wood hearts that we made a couple of weeks ago, full of succulents. This was a little class we did, but these are by far the easiest to maintain in your home. For the most part, every plant that you see, every plant out there really just likes bright indirect light. That's the safest thing. I've said all along, we don't put them next to the heat register. We don't put them next to the air conditioner. We have to have them just a little bit away from the window so they don't burn. But if you get those basic conditions, and then I'll teach you about watering, and you should have fabulous plants. Anyway, the succulents are wonderful. All of the water is in their leaves. This is something I did with some leftover plugs. These are little tiny plants that are about this size. This is a plug, and they come in succulents, and we have them available as well. But I stuck in about 9 of them in our little heart shape for Valentine's Day, and I had a few left over, and that is why I did the little mugs you see. But for an upcoming brunch, I have to do 15 teacups and saucers with plugs in them, plus a little bit of moss. And you can see that right in there just to fill it out and make it a finished look. But they're so, so easy. The thing is, they cannot stand standing water. And this pot here gets watered thoroughly every 2 weeks. Missed it once in a while, but I just set it out. I do move it around. I like to move some of the plants around or turn them so they get full exposure on all sides for the light. But the succulents, you know, are very self-maintaining. If you travel, this is the perfect plant to carry. We've also got these incredible containers. This one I did, and we still have these, I believe. So it looks like a little slice of a log, and I put some of the other succulents right in here with some of my rocks. Sometimes I use rocks or shells on the top to cover the soil, and this has been a deterrent for some of our pets that like to get into them, and it does help with that. But these are low maintenance. I like to check my plants every day. It's just something I do to bend and stretch, and it's like doing a little bit of yoga, but these need almost nothing. So this is an ideal plant to carry, to have in your home if you're one of those busy, busy people like we all are. But I also want to show you, related to these, is the mangave. Now, this is a cross between the agave and the manfreda. So we call this a mangave. The thing is, the agave have those really, really sharp points on them. And so we don't always have those around because they can be a little bit dangerous for some of our younger visitors. But this is a cross, so it's a softer leaf, but it has that same architectural look. And I'm just crazy about them, but I do water these just a little bit more than the succulents and just a little bit more than I would an agave. But this one, I just love. It's got pretty speckled leaves on it as well. But this past year, it's gotten all these new growths. We have several varieties of the mangaves. This one is called Bad Hair Day. And the one that I bought last fall has doubled in size already. Bright indirect light, very little water. All right, so moving on from succulents and mangaves, I'd like to go into our pothos. The thing is, this is probably, this along with ivy are really some of the very, very easiest plants to carry, and they don't need much light at all. Now, I can't just have it in a pot, of course, so I put it in one of my teapots. So this is in my guest room, and I keep the lid just beside it for cuteness. But this one is naturally lime green. This is not a water issue or fertilizer issue. It just comes in this beautiful lime green. But think about all the choices you have in your home, or maybe things that we might have to inspire you to have a different kind of a container than a regular flower pot. So anyway, this is pothos, low light, water it. You know, I'd like to check them once a week. That's fine. Overwatering is just as bad as not watering. You know when it really needs water, when the soil in the container is shrinking from the container. That means it's so dry that even if you water it, the water is going to go outside of that root ball. So we want to water it a little more than that. All right, so beside the pothos, we do have philodendron. And this is something you know. Now we carry these. This is one of the many varieties of philodendron monstera. There are multiple sizes. Some of them are very, very large, and they're known for these incredible leaves. But this one is the dwarf variety. But we do carry the giant size. Most of our house plants will really be available. Many when we first open, April 1st, many come in and are displayed by the middle of April. So that is that. So the next thing we're going to cover.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Drainage holes in your containers, recommendations, and
Okay, good question. I'm glad you asked. So most of my containers do have drainage holes for sure. However, things like my teapot, I assure you, does not. So this has got about an inch or two of pea gravel. And then I really have to be careful with not overwatering because it would really saturate the root and it could even rot. So drainage is key, but I do like to use broken pieces of pottery or pea gravel or shells. And sometimes in my terrariums, I will even use activated charcoal. And that's another thing that we can, put in our refrigerators just to keep them fresh. But let's talk about that. So this one is another one with no drainage holes, of course. Terrariums are awesome. These are also extremely low maintenance. This one has been very happy, so it's growing out of its containers. I'm just going to set it down right here. Maybe I'll move this over. So I do love to make terrariums. I just think they're pretty, and my plants at home have to be pretty. People that I work with know that I like to have it pretty. And so these get the probably 2 inches of pea gravel, which is very small little rocks. It's available very inexpensively. We do carry a little bit here, or you can get it by the bag full very inexpensively, but I really have to have that at the bottom. And then the soil. We carry our own potting soil here, and I will tell you, with everything on here, even though they carry special varieties for violets and succulents, I'm so happy with our Growing Place potting soil. It has everything in it that you need. So that comes in next. And when you're making a terrarium, sometimes they're as deep as this one, and sometimes they're a little shallower like this. And these just came in. This is a beautiful container for a terrarium, and you could use dry things inside, such as a little bird's nest with eggs for Easter, or you could actually put a plant in here, but you still see there's no drainage. So you're going to have to put some gravel in there before you put your soil and plants. So having said that, the most important thing, whether it's interior design with gardening with your plants or outdoors, the basic thing is that things that like the same growing conditions, be it water or sun, have to be planted together. That is the whole secret to success. If you start putting succulents into a terrarium, that's fine, but it has to be a terrarium that is completely open. Okay, you cannot have a cover on it. It would be too humid, they would rot in no time, so have it open. But you could not put ferns and other humid-loving house plants in a with the succulents. It's one or the other. That's it. And this one happens to like the humidity. I've also got some beach rocks in here and some of my larger ones, because this is hardly the biggest one that I have. And so some of my terrariums are very big, and I have antique bottles in them and larger beach rocks and sometimes ceramic flowers in them. I mean, you can really make them a work of art to enjoy and give them a prominent place. But the terrariums are so little work. They require so little water. And those that I have at home that are covered with little ferns and such in it, I mean, I water them like once a season. They're really, really low maintenance and so pretty and artistic. So I'm just going to move this over because we have more to do here. Just put this over here. Okay, so moving on from succulents and pothos and mangaves and philodendron, I want to go into the sansevieria. And you know this plant, you know the leaves that are nice and straight and tall. There's really nothing easier than the sansevieria. Maybe you know it as mother-in-law's tongue, but this is one that we carry. I happen to like this one because it shows extreme variegation. Some of them are more solid green, but they all have stripes in them. Here's a great thing. They only need water every 3 weeks. That's it, or they will rot. They like that bright indirect sun, but I don't just put this out. Oh, no, no, no. It has to be in a prettier container. And I do assure you that here at the growing place, we have lots to choose from for containers, but I do love this. And I want to show you my other favorite sansevieria, which is this one. Now, how fun is this? Isn't that just pretty? These are very cylindrical tubes. This is sansevieria African spear, like Britney Spear, okay, African spear. Now, I think this is just gorgeous. I think it's architecturally interesting. I water it once every 3 weeks. This plant was given to me a 1.5 years ago in this pot. And because it's had the correct soil and watering and sun, this is what's happened. I would also tell you that it's March now, as you well know, and this is the time to begin fertilizing your houseplants. And I do it once a month, March through August, and then I stop. And I have used liquid fertilizer. I've used fish emulsion, which is a little smelly, and I do sometimes use a slow release houseplant fertilizer. They do need it because the soil is wonderful, but it's not, it needs the help, it needs a little food. Without it, sometimes the leaves will turn a little bit yellow. That's the other thing I should mention. When you are looking to buy a houseplant, you want to make sure that it is healthy. And I look at the whole thing. I look under the leaves. I want to make sure that within the core there isn't soft tissue, that there are not yellow leaves. I want it firm. I want it just perfect. Very frequently on plants, there will be lower leaves that are yellow or brown. That's okay. Those are the old leaves. Those are the original leaves. They can be cut off. That is fine. But I'd like to have a good plant to start with. Now, sometimes, happily, they grow, and like this one did, which makes me very happy. But this is something else I did. So when I was here a couple weeks ago, I bought one of these. This is a Kalanchoe flapjack, and I think these are incredibly beautiful. They can flower, but it's about the foliage, clearly. The more sun it has, the redder the leaves will be. But look at the size of the pot, and what are you going to do with this? I mean, it's wonderful, and it's affordable, but this doesn't do it for me. So this is what I did. Because I just did this a couple weeks ago. So I have put it into a larger container, and now I've got something really pretty to look at, don't you think? I just think they're wonderful. So I watered this thoroughly. every couple of weeks. It doesn't need it. This one can take more sun. But honestly, when you've got these things indoors, I don't like to put anything right next to the window. It can get too hot. And there are a couple of exceptions. This one can tolerate it. But the point is this, as long as we're talking about this type of thing, I have my terracotta pots, and maybe you don't do this, but I do because I can. I've got all my terracotta pots over in one corner, and they all have matching containers that are terracotta, that like the same growing condition, the same sun, the same watering. They're over there together. Now, over here in this corner of my house, I have all the white containers. Now, you may not want to go there, but nevertheless, this becomes part of the interior decorating of your home. I mean, these are works of art, and they're so easy. All right, so I'm going to get this out of the way. And I did the same thing with the staghorn fern. I bought this a couple weeks ago, and I love these. I think they're beautiful. We carry them. We have had these before, but we have never had them this quality. This is the best I've ever seen. And of course, I couldn't resist, so I had to buy one of these. So I'll just put that right over there. But this is what I did with mine. I know, I just had to bring all this stuff from home because I had to show you. There's just no way that words can describe this. Now, here's what I'm going to lift it up so you can see what I did. So what I do is I make these towers out of the containers. And all my containers are from the growing place from one time or another. But now I've got this work of art that I can just put out and enjoy. But the other thing is this. You'll notice that I've got these trays upside down and right side up. Sure, it catches the water when they get watered. But here's the thing. I'm very protective of my wood floors, of my countertops, of my tables, of any surface that my plants are going on. So not only do the direct under trays catch the water or the moisture, but now that I've got a secondary one, it not only makes it look pretty, but it protects carpeting and other surfaces where these plants would be. But I like to have different heights. And so that's why I've got this big one. And I put, again, I'm not going to lift this whole thing up, but you can see I've got this built up. And we have lots of terracotta here. We've got the saucers, we've got everything. Now, one other challenge you might come across in is, say, this is really too small for this pot. Of course it is. So it would, if I didn't build it up, and I've got multiple flats and pots and stuff in here to bring up the height, because this is the pot I wanted to use. So I put this in, and when I get home, I'm going to plant it right in here, and it'll be fine. But this will be in my terracotta corner, and it doesn't look messy. I don't have to put plastic out or anything. I've just got these pretty containers to keep it looking nice. Okay, so what else
Joannie,
I got?
can I ask a question about the staghorn fern and what it needs as far as water and care?
Of course, of course. So the staghorn ferns, let's think of what that word is. It's fern. So all ferns, I don't care what kind of fern they are, whether they're this kind of fern or this kind of fern, ferns have to have humidity. And if they don't have humidity and they have too much sun, the tips are going to brown. In fact, this is what can happen to a fern if it doesn't get enough humidity, if it's by a heat register. Can you see how the tips of the fern can get brown? So humidity is important. So how do we handle that? Apart from correct watering, which is, I would never let the soil shrink so much from the container that it would become too far away and the water would not be receptive. It would just pour around it. So this is watered twice a week. Okay, this has got to look good. I love it, and I want it to do well. And even these little plates, I don't know if you can see these within here. They are part of the leaf. It's a different look, but they have these plates that also have roots that absorb the water down here. So I don't want this to dry out too much. I want it to have bright and direct light, and I water it. Now, having said that, I should show you a couple of my watering cans. So this one is for the bigger boys. I do have some larger plants I didn't bring today. They're from here, but you know, you have to just imagine. So when I have to have a little more water, so I don't have to make so many trips to my water at the sink, but I have these little guys because they can get right in here where the water is needed. They've got these long spouts with a small hole. And so just the right gentle amount of watering happens. But all ferns have to have moisture. They really, really don't want to dry out. And I water my ferns twice a week. I can't use softened water. I do have a water softener, and they don't do well with salt, obviously. So I use, I have an osmosis system, and maybe your tap water is city water and you don't have to worry about the salt, but the ferns have got to have humidity. The other way is in some of the trays underneath the pot, I will have that pea gravel or marbles or something that will not only catch the extra water, but it can also hold water. And that is something, I'm just going to move this bad boy. I'm going to try to.
Joannie, can you talk a little bit about ZZ plants?
About what?
The ZZ plant that you have in your terrarium. I have a question up here about yellowing stems. And she waters it about every 2 weeks. So my thought is maybe too much water.
Well, like in perennials, you know, we like to stick our finger into the soil, and no gardener should be afraid to do that. If your finger goes more than an inch into the soil and it's dry, clearly it needs water. But overwatering can be watering is the biggest problem for killing plants. And if they start turning yellow, it's almost always because of overwatering. We love to water our plants, or sometimes we forget to water our plants. It's too hard to make a schedule to say, well, every Friday I'm going to water these. But they do speak to us, and they say when they're unhappy. And as I said, if your yellow leaves are lower, it's just older leaves finishing. But if they start getting yellow leaves up here, you better just hold back the water a little bit. But what I was going to say then about the gravel in the trays is that if you have, for example, a violet, or if you have a cyclamen, we've got some beautiful cyclamens here. This is the only way to water them. We always water those absolutely only from the bottom up, never up here. But if they're sitting on stones that are moist, they're going to be very, very happy. Cyclamen actually would like it just a little bit cooler. They don't need a hot, hot house. So really you can back these up a little bit from your window. And these bloom for months at a time. And even this pretty one, there are still new buds coming up from the base of it that you can, maybe you can't see it from there, but these go on for months at a time. One thing I want to cover is with the cyclamen or any other plant, I don't rip off the stems when you have, for example, like these leaves. These need to come off. And it would be so tempting to just rip them off on anything. And I don't do that because now you have a jagged edge on the stem, which is prone to bacteria. And that invites a whole nother set of issues. But my little pruning scissors, and there's all kinds of them out there, I will take that and just go right in here. And these have already been dipped in alcohol. Okay, and it's like 50 cents a bottle. But before you start snipping around so that you don't get one contagion to another, and then I just go in here and cut these right off like that. Okay, just to keep it looking pretty. But these will continue to bloom for quite some time. But I do like to put these on pea gravel and the violets as well. Now here's an exception with our violets, okay? Again, they must be watered from the bottom up. Sometimes I use, instead of a saucer that they're in, I will use a cereal bowl. And very frequently with a lot of my houseplants, that is how I water them. And we're going to go into that just a little bit more. But just putting, a couple inches of water in here, and it goes up in the openings, the drainage holes. That's where the water is needed, and the roots, not this. We don't ever water overhead, but this too has a couple leaves that need to come up. That's just not pretty. So we snip those off. And this again will bloom a great deal. Now, when it goes dormant, and it may go dormant a little bit in the winter, because remember, we don't have as much sun as we will start to get by the end of this month, and then it will start producing flowers again. So the one time that you can have violets, instead of being in the eastern exposure, you can have them on the south or western window just in the winter. But you got to keep an eye on the watering, but they will continue to flower. Now here's something else with these leaves, which are kind of furry. You need to brush off any dust this is just a makeup brush, or a small paintbrush would do, just to keep these leaves clean. All the leaves need to be clean. And I meant to say that a little bit early, but I'm so often I'm distracted. So I'm going to move this over and we'll go into that a little bit. Anyway, the cyclamens are gorgeous. Oh, I just have to show you one thing. So yesterday, it was another beautiful day. And I went outside and I painted one of my old pots black. They know me around here. I really like to spray things. And this was something that was, I've had from the growing place for years. And my granddaughter had painted these flowers on it. And she's way past that now. She's going into college. And it just wasn't pretty, and it wasn't washing off. So I decided to paint it black. And I thought, oh, with those white flowers, isn't that pretty? It's really striking. That could be on your centerpiece of the table, along with the oxalis. I better show these as well. So the oxalis, as like a shamrock, okay? And this one has white flowers. Now, this is something that is actually kind of a bulb, and they too will go dormant. And dormant does not mean dead. It just means somewhere in the year they say, okay, I need a break. I need a rest. We all feel that way sometimes, but it doesn't mean it's dead. And it doesn't mean you should completely stop watering it. It means you should just give it a little break, just a little water to keep it alive. But then it comes back. And like I said, with these, there are dozens of little buds down in here. So these cyclamen, these are going to be blooming for months and months at a time. All right, I'm going to put that over here.
Hey, Joanie, I have another question.
Go ahead.
For plants like ferns and other things that like more humidity, what are some of the ways you can add humidity to their environment?
Well, the first and foremost is keeping an eye on their watering. That's number one, paramount, critical. Number two, again, is having the stones in their saucer and keeping that with water. Overdoing it, you don't need to make a mess, but that is why sometimes I have multiple trays, one right side up and one upside down. I don't have a humidifier at home. I'm not there, but those are the two things that I find consistently work.
What's your opinion on like misting them with the mister?
Misting is awesome. I think that works for some people. I just have to be careful because I don't always want it on everything around it. You just have to be careful, but misting can be, especially for the ferns. But using a clean spray bottle, maybe you've got a Windex bottle that's empty and you rinse it out and you can put water in it and control the spray. But this is why the secret in success with these things is keeping things that like the same growing condition together. So things, all your ferns are together, so you can mist everything at one time. But again, I feel you have to be careful with your surfaces. And my plants are on interesting things. And so for me, it works better with the gravel and just checking the water all the time. But misting is also a good good thing to do. All right, so I want to talk about cleaning the plants too, because sometimes we have these larger leaves, and with our philodendrons, some of these get really, really big leaves. These plants need to be cleaned, and I do this pretty regularly, and in the winter they're in my shower, okay, and I can hose them down because if they are dirty, if they're dusty, and I assure you carpeting is, in my opinion, the great producer of dust. And of course, in the summer, we have our windows open and many of these things are outside, but these have to be cleaned, I think, at least once a season. So if you can't put it in the shower, and sometimes I put a whole group of them in there, sometimes you just take a clean cloth with warm water, and we are cleaning the leaves like this. Does it take a little time? Yes. But if they're not getting the best sun that they can, if they're not getting the correct sun, they're not going to be growing for you. But I do it on top of the leaf, I do it under the leaf, and I do the stems. So that's really, really important. Also with watering, sometimes you can't get to, well, let's just anything. So let's just say this violet needs a little water and I'm impatient and I don't have time to soak it for 30 minutes. So sometimes I use a little turkey baster. And I've done that also with my terrariums. And we have to control the quantity of water that these get. All right, so moving on. We're going to do a little repotting. How does anybody feel about repotting? It's time to do that because very, very soon we're going to be outside gardening. Now, if some of your plants go outside, these plants, none of these plants need to be put in the hot sun all day. They'll burn up, every single one of them, whether it's the succulents or not. So they need to be, well, preferably eastern exposure. But if that isn't doable, part sun and part shade. Otherwise, some of them will burn up. Some of them don't go out until mid-May because I don't want anything freezing at night. These are tropicals. These are house plants, not used to the cooler nights that come with early spring. So some of these just get put under my trees. This is where I put cyclamen as they start to finish flowering, but they don't like to have mushy water. They like to have just moist all the time, just moist. And so the cyclamen will be going under my amber maple tree. My amaryllis will be going under the maple tree, all in their pots. So when it rains, they get water. Otherwise, they're left alone to rest. Sorry. So having said that, I wanted to show you another growing plant that I love. And it's a type of fern, but believe it or not, it's in the lily family, but we don't need to go into all that. So this is a plant, and you can see it's really pot bound. I mean, these roots and tubers, and it has both. If you're not familiar with what a tuber is, maybe you've dug up daylilies and they got those really wonderful fat roots that are like your finger. I mean, that's what these are like. So this was so tight. And once a week, I had to put this into my cereal bowl to let it water for about 30 minutes. But I've had it. Okay, I'm done with all that. I don't want to do that. So I've decided to repot it. And in order to do that, because this is so tightly connected to the container, I had to make a slit. I couldn't just lift it out. I mean, the roots are stuck to the pot. This is extremely common. But this plant is going to thank me for doing this. So I've cut this down and I'm going to break it open this and pull it out. And look at these wonderful roots it has. It has roots and tubers. Can you see that? Okay. But if I were to put this directly into the container that I want, they will continue to grow, but they'll grow directly around the root ball. And it's the same thing when we plant our perennials. I mean, you have to pull these things apart. However, it's so tight that they need help. So I was going to put my gloves on, and you can see that they're very well worn. But that's okay. That's good. So anyway, very frequently I can pull these apart, but this one needs help. So I have my favorite garden tool, which is an old chef knife. I got at Goodwill, and I'm going to try not to cut the tubers, but I'm going to try to cut in the space between the tubers. I just go like this, just like I'm cutting a piece of meat, okay? And I'm going to do that at least on 3 sides, sometimes with 4, and open these things up. Okay. All right, now I can pull this apart like this. Okay, now these roots are saying, oh, this is great, because now I can really grow and they will reach out into the soil in the container, and it's going to be really happy. Now, one trick is this plant was watered yesterday. Before you start doing these things, you need to make sure the plant is correctly and fully watered the day before. So anyway, I'm pulling this apart. Some of this I don't need. I'm just going to pull off anything loose and extra. That's okay. It doesn't matter, because these are going to be so happy. All right, so now I've got my new pot. Now this is considerably bigger, but this is great. The pot that you put it in should be at least 2 inches greater in diameter than what you had. And this is what I had. So this is where I'm going. And some people might say it's too big, but then I don't have to do it again for quite some time. Now, the other thing I like to use before I do this is the one and only time ever that I will recommend landscape fabric, which is a very bad thing. However, I'm trying to keep the soil, and if I were to put in gravel in here, I'm trying to keep that from spilling out. And also, when these things go outside, I don't want anybody uninvited going in that hole. So this landscape fabric does the job. Now, I didn't happen to bring any pea gravel with me, so it doesn't matter, but I do happen to have our wonderful soil with me. And our soil comes in 2 bags. This is the small size, but I always have a large bag of our Growing Place potting soil with me. And in the winter, it is in my garage, and it is in my large cooler, so that it never freezes, so that if I feel like messing with my plants one day, and just a few weeks ago, like 3 weeks ago, I redid all of my orchids, and I could use my soil because that's where I keep it. So what am I doing? I'm just going to, I don't have my scoop with me. You know, I brought as much as I could. So I'm going to put some soil in the bottom of it. And all right, so now I'm going to take this wonderful root ball. And again, I'm just pulling off anything that's loose. I don't want any of that in there. If we don't do this, these tubers on top, they're going to dry up, and they're going to be like wood. It's going to be ugly. So all right, I'm putting it right in the center there. You know how this works. And then I add the soil. Now, it's always a good idea, again, to make sure that your root ball has been watered prior to doing this, with time enough that the roots and the tubers have had time to absorb the moisture. And for now, I'm just going to put in, I think that'll do it. Let me get this out of the way. And we're going to do one more after this that I want you to see. Anyway, so this is in the center. I'm pressing it down. It's all good. And sometimes, you know, I need more. So I put in pretty beach rocks. I put in some of our gift shop ceramic mushrooms, whatever, you know, to make it cute. But now I have a really pretty plant that's going to stay with me for years and years. And these don't lose their leaves. If they do, I just cut them off. But because I'm so good about watering, they just continue to grow and stay green. It's all about water, really. So I'm going to put this over here.
Joni, can I jump in with a couple questions?
Of course.
For orchids, I just want to confirm we recommend using orchid bark or sphagnum moss, not soil.
Yes, we do.
And
And we
then,
do carry orchid bark. But sometimes if you don't happen to have it, like some people, and you feel like redoing your orchids, I've had success with our potting soil, but always, as you know, Becca, the orchid bark is best, and even a little bit of sand. They demand humidity, they demand drainage, but the winter, early winter was the best time for us to do that, because in the fall, they like it cooler and they go dormant. So yeah,
and then somebody had a question about rubber plants.
about
And
rubber plants.
yeah,
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. All right, so here's the great thing about rubber plants. They have that really dark burgundy leaf. The darker the foliage on a plant, the less light it needs. The darker the leaf color, the less light it needs. And so rubber plants you will see on TV, you'll see in magazines, they're always in the back corner because they don't need as much light. But they do very, very well here. But again, they still have to have water. And I see this all the time. I see this when I go shopping at other places, and the plants are shrinking from the container and they have not watered them. And so again, watering these bigger plants, and rubber plants are usually in a bigger container, you've got to keep an eye on them, because it's not they love water so much, but if you wait too long, the water, again, it goes out to the sides and the roots are not getting the water. So, but rubber plants are incredible. Think of the leaf coverage they have. These plants are breathing in what we breathe out. And so they are excellent filters in our homes, especially right now when we have the windows closed, except for today. Today, we're all opening our windows because it's going to be gorgeous. But these plants are filtering out the toxins in our carpet and paint and so forth. So rubber plants are awesome for that, absolutely awesome. But they have incredible color to blend in with the other shades of green that we have.
yeah.
Okay,
So
I got something else.
I have another question.
Yes.
Which is in the same family. So
What?
fiddly figs and
Yes.
rubber plants are both ficus family.
Okay.
And for both of those, they seem to, once you find, at least in my personal experience, once you find a place where they're happy, they don't like to be moved a lot. So you have to find a place and then leave it there.
And put them there and keep them there. Absolutely. Ficus benjamimus, the one with the smaller, shinier leaf, they really don't. If you move them across the room, they're going to drop all their leaves. They don't like that. So just keep them happy. It doesn't kill them. They just have to grow new foliage again. But yeah, put those where you want them. That's a good point.
And then fiddly figs also are a bit touchy, I think, like a little finicky as far as I can tell whenever I try them. Do you have any tips for fiddly figs?
Well, if you're a plant geek, and you are, Becca, and I, we like to check on our plants regularly, frequently. And so they do need a bit of checkup regularly so that you know if they need water. It's consistently not consistent watering and not consistent fertilizing and not consistent maintenance. That's where the trouble begins. We're checking water, we're checking fertilizer. Do they need to be repotted? Do they have issues under their leaves? Is there something living with it that shouldn't be? I think they do very, very well. They too are in all the TV shows in the corner. And I love them. I love those big leaves. But these are living things that need our care. And there's nothing I have here that you just forget about it. Even the Sansevieria, even though it needs water only every 3 weeks, it still has to be looked at. And I find that regular checking up on your plants, it's not like a child, but they're important to us and they add so much beauty to our home. All right, so I got something else for you.
I'm going to lead you into your next topic about repotting. How do you know when to repot your plant?
Oh, great. Well, for like what I just showed you, when you have roots bulging out of the pot so badly that they don't fit in here nicely, that is the clue. Okay, I mean they're unhappy. and I probably put it in a bigger pot than I needed to, but that's the one that made me happy. But they do. We buy them, they're so affordable that you want to buy several, and you should, when they're in these small pots. But these are meant for purchasing and for putting in little containers and such. But at some point, they do need a bigger container. And sometimes when they're shrinking and you can see the roots at the top of the plant, and they're coming up, and they're coming out of the bottom. For example, this one. Okay, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Okay, are you ready? Okay, so look at this. Okay, what do you think this need to be repotted? I'm thinking so. I'm thinking so. So this is actually a colocasia, which I know you know this plant. You think of the elephant ear with the giant leaves. This is its younger sister. Okay, these are smaller plants, but this is all it's done all winter because we don't have as much sun. It loves water. They're actually a bulb. I mean, look at this incredible plant, but it can't wait until it has more sun and, by the way, fertilizer, and it definitely needed repotting. So here's what I'm going to show you. So I don't need all this. The plant doesn't need all this. It needs this, but this is what I'm going to do. So I have my scissors right here, big scissors, not my little pruning scissors. No, this is serious stuff. So I'm cutting it off just like that. Okay. I don't want any broken stems, roots in here. They got to be clean. Now, when I took it out of the pot yesterday or the day before, I can't remember, I did shake off the old potting soil. Number one, we never ever use garden soil for the house plants. It's too heavy, it's got clay. We never do that. Not only that, we don't know what's in it. Our potting soil is sterilized. We've got to have, absolutely, before you mess around with that stuff, you've got to have clean pots and sterilized soil. You got to do it because it'll save you stress or distress when things don't go right. So this is now ready for repotting. Okay, I've just made it just right, and I need the right size container. I'm not repotting this. I just showed you how to do that. But you pull it out and you say, oh my gosh, look at the mass of roots around it. And sooner or later, the roots take over, and there's very little soil in it. And you know that triggers when you have got to repot it for sure. So clean pot, sterilized potting soil, and I'll put this in there when I get home in a bigger pot than it was in. But then I'll start fertilizing because it's March. Everything here is going to get a dose of fertilizer because it's that time to do that. All right, so I'm going to just move this over. Now, this is an example. These leaves get so big. This is a perfect example of either in the shower, which it may be in too big of a pot for me to carry. So this is when I have my warm, soft cloth that cleans the leaves. But plants, again, to repeat, they do not receive the nutrition they need from the sun if their plants are clogged up with dust and dirt. So, all right, I'm going to put this over here. All right, is there anything? I
have a couple questions.
Yeah.
What's your opinion about watering plants once a week or on a schedule?
I used to think that was a great idea, and I've adhered to that. Like, I tell people, like, if your day off is, Sunday or Friday, make that the day that you really look at your plants. It doesn't mean they have to be watered once a week. I do feel you should have a schedule if that helps you to look at them, because forgotten plants do not perform for you. But as far as watering, I used to think it was a great idea. Now I'm reading it's not the best idea. I don't know. I just love my plants. They're what makes my home look pretty. So I'm looking at them every day. However, I don't water them all at the time. I go over to my ferns with the terracotta pots and the philodendrons, and I know those are going to need water twice a week. So I take care of the whole bunch, whatever day I feel like doing it. And then another day, a different day, I go over and check this group. But they need your attention. They need your love. That's why you bought them. They're so pretty. But with these interesting containers, I mean, they just add so much to your interior home. I mean, I used to teach that every room needed one plant for every 100 square feet to filter out the plants, and especially the Sansevieria, which needs so little light. And they are phenomenal in bedrooms where you don't have as much light usually, and you're sleeping and they're working for you. So, okay, I got
a couple more questions.
Go ahead, Beth.
My personal opinion is I don't water on a schedule. I water when they need it, so I check them because some need more and some need less. For watering once a week.
Okay.
The temperature of the water you use, I personally just do it from my tap water, but I don't know if you have any better suggestions, Joannie.
Room temperature water is best. Cold water is a bad idea. Hot water is a bad idea. Room temperature is best. My mother used to put out her water in her watering can the night before, so it would be room temperature. I don't have time for that. So, but I do use non-softened water. That's, again, not, it is critical. But tap water, if you have city water, that is just fine, but not cold and not hot, just comfortable, because these roots are alive, and if they're really dry, they're going to just suck it right up. So yeah, be careful with your water temperature. And sometimes, like right now, I'll be putting my fertilizer into the water.
And then one other question, just maybe a general, if you see like yellowing spots, the person, if you see like yellowing spots on your leaves that start to turn brown, is there a common cause of that, or is it specific to each plant, do you think?
Well, I suppose it depends on the kind of plant, and is there two leaves that look like that, or is it the whole plant? I mean, it just depends. If it's a couple of leaves, they're out of there. Okay, I just cut them off. That's just how I do it. If it's the whole plant, clearly there's some sort of issue going on. There could be bacteria or fungus going on. It is very, very difficult to say. I know I already mentioned that the lower leaves always fall off because they're the original leaves, but yellow spots could be, when the leaves are fully yellow, I mean, that's, yes, anyway, so I don't know if it's just a couple of leaves. Whenever there's a brown leaf or a couple, I just cut them off, right? Yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe if the caller sent you a picture, I could do better. I don't know what kind of plant it is. I don't know what kind of watering she does, the kind of light it receives. Is it near other plants that also might have a little issue? It's hard to say.
Okay.
So, okay.
No more questions right now.
All right. So I did also want to show you a dish garden, because sometimes we receive them. More importantly, I just like to make them. And we've got, again, these beautiful cyclamen. To me, these flowers look like a butterfly, do they not? I mean, I just think that's the cutest little thing. And they have such a pretty pattern on their leaves. So these would always go into a dish garden. And I do have them with our oxalis, which also flower. And again, all of these things can at some point go dormant, but I happen to like this combination of the burgundy leaf with the hot pink flowers. And then we'll be selling these, I call these Trades Cantia. I don't know what they call them over in annuals, but it's an annual house plant. And it's got this incredible purple foliage. So to me, this is the perfect plant to add in here to make a proper dish garden, because sometimes just a dish garden makes an incredible centerpiece for Easter or any company that you're having. But they're wonderful. And it doesn't have to be in a pot like this. It can be, I don't know where I put my tray. Here it is. It could be in a tray like this, just to set out, 3 or 5 plants on this, just looking pretty, protecting your surfaces and holding the water. Oh, I wanted to cover one other thing, if I may. So this is another wonderful and easy care houseplant. You know this is a spider plant. We all know them and have them or have had them. So this one, these little babies broke off my larger plant. And so I put them in water, and within just a couple weeks, I already get roots like this. So this is now ready to put into a container. But I love the variegation of it. I love all the plants. I love the dark leaves, but when you have a variegated plant with a solid green plant, I think it's a lot more interesting and artistic. All right, so I'm just trying to think if there's anything I didn't cover. I think I did it. We've talked about bright indirect light for sure. We've talked about careful watering with the cyclamen and the violets. For sure, it's got to be from underneath. For sure, they've got to be, in the bowl or the saucer.
I've got a question.
Okay, and just lastly, remove any foliage that's finished to make it prettier. But the finished foliage, it doesn't look good, but it also may add bacteria. So you got to get them out of there. All right, what was the question?
So from when you pot that rooted cutting into the soil, do you have to water it more than you would normally water it, or just water it regular?
Wait, what?
Like your spider plant that you just rooted and put in the soil.
Well, it's like anything else. I'll be checking it a lot. Now, it won't go into a great big pot like the other one. It's going to go into a pot that's probably the same size as this, just a smaller pot, until the roots grow. And they happen to like a lot of water, actually. They can actually live in water, obviously. So I do it in a small pot until the roots fill it out. So watering wise, I water it thoroughly when I plant it, and with our potting soil, never garden soil. And I just check it. And so many of us that have been doing this a long time, we can just look at it and know. Again, watch for that shrinking of the soil. If it's hard, if the soil is hard, it really needs fresh soil, so repot it. But yeah, just stick your finger in it. And if your finger goes below an inch that's dry, for sure you need to water it. So I can take these off. Is that okay? Anything else?
Does anybody have any more questions for Joanie? Do you use Osmocote or a similar thing for your new houseplants?
Well, sometimes, depending on where the plant comes from, sometimes from the store, they've already been well fertilized, so we may not need to do that right away. But I do say for existing house plants that you have, March is definitely the time to begin to fertilize. And I will be doing that this month on everything. And again, I've done liquid fertilizer for house plants specifically. I'm skipping the fish emulsion, which is excellent product, but it does add an aroma to the house that I'm not crazy about. And I have used Osmocote and other slow release fertilizers. Well, if you use a slow release, that means you don't have to do it every month, that it will tell you on the package, how many weeks that will last. And of course, it depends on how much of the slow release fertilizer you put on the plant. And over fertilizing isn't a good thing either, because if you put too much of it on there, you're going to get beautiful foliage and no flowers. So you got to be really careful, especially with your outside plants, which also get fertilizer because they're producing new roots and flowers like crazy. So yes, fertilizer is awesome. Just make good choices. There's so much out there to choose from.
Jennifer, did you want to ask a question?
Whoops, hold on, sorry, hold on. Up. Yes, I did, but actually, I wanted to know, Joni, if you repotted a plant in a, say, 2 to 3 times larger container, is there a negative to that other than looking odd or off balance?
Okay, so I'm all about having it pretty. Okay, so the plant I just repotted is probably in a plant pot one size bigger than it should have been. I don't really care because it's now going to fit in with my scheme of things. And it means that I don't have to plant it, repot it again. There's no downside at all. It's going to give me the look I want. The plant's going to say, this is great. I will just fill it out, give me a little more time than I might have in a smaller pot. I don't think there's any downside at all.
My only caution would be taking like a 4-inch pot to a 12-inch pot, like you.
Well, I just put it in a 10-inch
But
pot.
that's like a
And I
big,
don't care. I don't care. I think it's okay. I mean, I really do, because it's going to save me work later. It means you may have to water it less. I don't know. I think it's a time saver personally. But
and I think it depends on the plant too. You know, that asparagus
Yes.
fern is a very hardy plant.
Okay,
But maybe so a 4-inch plant to like a 16-inch pot, I would caution
that would, you know, in the business, that's what we do here at the growing place. It would go from a plug to a 3-inch pot to a 4-inch pot to a, you know, until it sells. But at home, just do what feels comfortable.
I have another question about some plants that are good to sit next to a window, some that can take a little more direct light.
So consistently, because in the winter we have so much less sun than in the summer, consistently my succulents are all getting south sun right now. And I hesitate to say this, but I've read this, that it is the one time in the winter that your little violets can be in a south or west window at the only time of the year, because otherwise they would prefer the eastern exposure, the morning light, the kind light. But in the winter, because there's so little sun, they don't mind, but just don't forget it, because it's otherwise too hot for it very soon. So, but certainly succulents, the mangaves, they love it. Oh, they just think this is great. Oh, I guess maybe I have to repot this. Look at this. See, the pot is breaking. So I might have to go home and do that today. I don't care, because it'll be so happy. And then it can join my other friends. Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, I do what you feel comfortable with. Maybe you have in your garage or your shed, or maybe you want to come over here and get some fresh, clean pots. And that's the other really, really important thing to avoid diseases with plants. You've got to have sterilized soil and really clean pots. I mean, this stuff has to be, I had to scrub these before I even set this in, because they can bring things with them.
Another question is if you have any tips to propagate a snake plant, the Sansevierias.
Well, they're very slow growing, very slow growing. And I have had some for years and never repotted them. It's not like the spider plant, which grows so quickly. Even these, you know, ferns here, they grow very, very quickly. But Sansevieria,
I think we're talking more like propagating from a leaf than say planting them.
Well, in truth, I haven't done that much of that. I know you can do it with begonias, you can do it with violets. This would not be my first choice. I don't think so, but somebody does it somehow, like the little heart-shaped succulents, little Hoyas that we had over Valentine's. That is done that way, but it's not my expertise, and I'm more of a girl that does divisions of plants, and I take my wonderful sharp knife, which I don't even know where I put it, and I make incisions and whack it in half. I think divisions are consistently more successful, personally, in perennials and in houseplants. And sometimes you can pull them apart with your hands, but The thing with the leaf, sticking it in the, and you have to have really fine soil and the correct sun and temperature. We have here at the growing place, we have a prop house, we have a propagation house, and we have people that just do that. And they've studied how to do this, but that's not my expertise. I think it's much harder to do it that way than to make a division, personally.
If you were dividing, you just pull apart the different
Oh,
seed
yeah.
plant families.
I've
Okay.
lost my favorite tool, my good knife, wherever it is, doesn't matter. But you saw me make a cut between the roots, and I went around the root ball that was so tight, it was like burlap. And so I made these slices, and I do the same thing with perennials, and I pull it apart with my hands and then get it in, and those roots reach out all by themselves. They've just been given a reason and the stimulation to do that. But I could have divided that plant. I could have divided this into maybe 3 plants for sure, but I don't want to do that. I want it just big and pretty. So I didn't, but the divisions are, I think, what is always going to be consistently successful for you. And that's what we want. But it's a good question though.
Does anybody else have any other questions? All right, well, thank you for joining us today. It has been fun, and thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us, Joanie.